So how perfect is it that we're getting tested by tech when we're talking about regulation and controlling our feelings, right?
You just heard Austin Hudson, who is a licensed professional counselor that specializes in children and teens. In this episode, Austin shares what is regulation and dysregulation and what dysregulation looks like in introverted kids. Austin also explained and demonstrated how to approach introverted kiddos and what could be some strategies to help kids regulate themselves emotionally and physically. And last thing, we also mentioned what is prompting hierarchy, so this episode is full with tools. So let's give the music its place and get started. Welcome to the Playground Talks podcast, a podcast for busy parents who want to own their parenting style and develop a stronger sense of how to handle challenging situations. I am Tamia Friat, your host and a mother of 3. In this podcast, I will interview psychologists, practitioners, behavioral therapists, teachers, and other experts about topics that bother all of us as parents, so you can get both the parenting principles and practical aspects that resonate with you, give you confidence and joy. Hey Austin, I'm so glad to have you here. I think we typically talk about the tend to scream and yell and, do those kind of extreme behavior, and we talk about them. But today I want to focus about the introverted kids, because I know you have a lot to say and a lot to share about them. So I want to start with asking you, how does dysregulation look like for a kid who is an introvert?
Yeah. So first I'll kind of go into basically how to assess anybody. So when we're looking at any kind of mental illness or anything like that, not in the sense that kids are having mental illness, but in the frame of dysregulation, is we're looking at differences of regular patterns. So for example, me being excitable is different than someone else being excitable. So what we're looking at for is a baseline difference. Just like when someone's depressed, they could be sleeping more, they could be sleeping less. Theoretically, it could be any level of sleep, right? It's that it's different. So it's the same with kids who are introverted. Is you want to observe what's going on with them so you can see, are they acting differently than usual? So when we go to regulation, we're trying to look at the differences when they're regulated versus when they're dysregulated. I try to break it down into 2 categories. Is I look at emotional regulation and I look at physical regulation, and they're kind of different things. So emotional regulation is like the ability to let a feeling be a feeling instead of a feeling being an action. So I feel angry. That doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily scream at somebody. It's just a feeling that happens for me. When it comes to physical regulation, that would be like physical coping skills that help activate our parasympathetic nervous system, that help calm us down. They're healthy coping mechanisms that adults have, that we'll have for life. It never changes. Part of my philosophy as a therapist is we're always kids. Nothing changes except for our ability to cope with our emotions. We still need certain things. That never goes away. It's just we manage better when our needs aren't met, or we manage better in meeting our own needs as we get older and have more insight. So, for example, physical regulation, the way to describe it is to adults about their kids and give them empathy is like it's like having to sneeze and never being able to sneeze. Or like wearing a really itchy sweater and you can't get it off. It sucks. So when a kid is really upset or they're moving out of their comfort zone, that's what it feels like. It's not great. And when you combine that with a lack of insight because they are kids and coping skills, it can get out of hand very, very fast. So we only want to shape their way of regulating if it's not pro-social. An example of this would be if a kid's way of regulating is getting their alone time and getting visual input and looking at something, or audio input and listening to music or talking to themselves or what have you. That's okay, right? People need that sometimes. When it becomes not pro-social, as if they have difficulty communicating that, or maybe they're leaving in the middle of a game or things like that, where there are implications to other people in a social gathering. So when someone's introverted, we're not trying to get them away from what they need to regulate. We're getting to them to be able to regulate pro-socially. So there's a huge difference. It would be like an adult in a relationship. Say I'm, with my girlfriend and I need alone time and we're watching a movie. I'm not just going to go turn the TV off and just walk out of the room, right? But I do need that alone time. That doesn't change. I could say, hey, I think I need alone time right now. I really enjoyed our time. I'm going to go take alone time for 30 minutes, something like that. So we're working on how to regulate pro-socially not necessarily taking how they regulate away, because that's part of them.
Got it. So I hear a lot you mentioning the part of communicating your needs, such as I need my alone time. Actually, it starts with being aware. So that's something that as parents, we need to work a lot to label those emotions. And
that's the difficult part, right? So basically, a lot of parents ask me, I think we're talking about kids 4 to 10. So we're talking about kids who are in concrete operation. There is zero understanding of abstract ideas. Like the idea that a feeling is different than an action. To a kid, it's not. They don't get that. So parents will be like, how can I get my kid to get this? And I'm like, you can't really. Kids are very cause and effect oriented. When it comes to us, our responsibility is to model to them what these things look like. That's paramount in how anybody learns anything. It's modeling. So we're trying to be able to, when we're dysregulated, manage our own feelings, control our own facial expressions, and respond in neutral ways, and only strategically give insight into emotions. So the way to describe this is if a kid is doing something that would be not pro-social in the sense that they're kind of being mean to you, or they're yelling at you and they're saying words to you, you're responding in a neutral way. You're not saying, hey, you're being mean to me. That's not necessarily very neutral. We would say something like, when you use a loud voice, it makes me sad. So we're saying the loud voice is what makes me sad. Not you using it necessarily. Not you being loud. The loud voice. Loud voice doesn't even necessarily mean you're angry. It's just loud. No interpretation necessary. And we're doing that intentionally so that the kid understands that, hey, when I use this loud voice, I think it makes people sad. And people are more likely to have self-awareness and insight when you're neutral. For example, let's say a boss, right? And you have a performance review. And I'm going, hey, here are the numbers. This is what it looks like. It seems like they're not meeting the mark. So what can we do? What can we do to solve this? You're more likely to take responsibility for the numbers than if I go, hey, so you're not working hard enough. Clearly, you're not meeting your deadlines. You're not doing this. You need to change something because you're not working out. You're more likely to be defensive and be like, my boss sucks. He's rude. I'm not going to do anything. So basically, we would have our boss in that situation. It would be easy to blame it on the boss. We would have little self-awareness when someone comes at us in a way that elicits a defensive response, when they're interpreting instead of giving a neutral response. When you give a neutral response, you elicit self-reflection and insight. You give someone the space where they see cause and effect. They go, generally, they're pretty goofy and fun, and now they're not. What could I have done in the equation that made that the case? So that would be why we would respond in a neutral way.
Can I pause it just a second?
Yeah.
What I'm getting is that instead of labeling the person like you're not okay or you did it wrong, you talk about the fact, like you raised your voice and then it made me feel uncomfortable. So it's just the little part of you that I don't feel comfortable with. It's not the whole you that makes me be uncomfortable. Would that sound okay?
Yeah, and that's called externalization. So it's a huge thing. So it's saying like, I actually don't like a loud voice no matter who the person is. This has nothing to do with you. I respond this way when the loud voice happens in any setting. So we're actually giving kids insight on the difference of behaviors. For example, with an introverted kid, the way they show their dysregulation is a lot different, right? It might not even be a loud voice, but we're still responding based on the same principle. There's a lot of indicators of somebody being dysregulated, going back to physical regulation and emotional regulation of what we talked about. Physical dysregulation tends to be a fight or flight response for most people. So it tends to be an activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which makes us not think at all. We have extremely little insight at that point, especially with kids who have already limited insight due to being a kid. So when it comes to that, we'll notice when it's a fight, flight, or freeze. So if you think about it, if we're trying to group in general terms, extroverts and introverts, extroverts may generally have more of a fight response. You're getting more of these loud, aggressive behaviors. When it comes to somebody who's introverted, you may get a flight or a freeze. So that's where you're on the lookout, is when they were playing before and they were feeling a little comfortable. Now you're getting a flight. Now they're leaving. Or you're getting a freeze. Now they seem kind of locked up. And so you're wanting to observe the behaviors behind that. So maybe they tighten their face a little bit. Their jaw kind of tightened. It could be that they kind of backed up and you see their kind of neck and head move back. It could be that they started looking down. They could start to look away from people, make a little less eye contact. So you're wanting to have an astute observation of when these things change. And when it does change, you're going to want to soften and give the kid some sort of insight or regulation that patterns off of what they are naturally needing. So you're going to make their dysregulation a pro-social, connective experience. Number one, so they're not lonely in their feeling. And number two, so they learn that they can have that feeling and manage it with someone else and manage it in a slightly different way. So for example, it's important in this context. There's a million different ways to look at this. I choose to look at it through the prompt hierarchy. I'm trying to look at if the kid's introverted, where I want to meet them in the prompt hierarchy, versus if the kid's extroverted, where I want to meet them. So for example, someone who's introverted, the first prompt would be like gestural. So I'm just going to make gestures. I'm just going to mirror at you. That's going to make you comfortable. So there's a few different kinds of input. There's proprioceptive, tactile, audio, visual, vocal, vestibular. So proprioceptive would be hard touch. Tactile, and you'll see kids who are kind of roughhousing doing that. Tactile, you'll see soft touch. Those are kind of those little cuddle bugs where they just want like a lot of little touches, little things like that. You got your audio input, which is kids who love sounds, who love impressions, who love hearing voices, who love like gun sounds or what have you. And then you got your visual, which is seeing something cool, seeing different patterns that are interesting or shapes or colors. And then you got vestibular, which is people who like roller coasters or dizziness or swaying side to side or rhythm, movement. So a lot of times you'll notice that introverted kids, they will need something like maybe audio input, maybe a little more tactile input. They'll need a more visual input. And the visual input is simply just being present with you. It's just you being there. It's them seeing you. That's enough input. That's regulatory. So if you're overdoing it and you're giving them like proprioceptive when they're not, that's just going to add to the dysregulation. So you're concerned with what regulates the child. And if you do one of those sensory things that don't regulate them, it'll actually probably dysregulate them. The thing about these sensory things is like anything in life, it's usually going to regulate them more or dysregulate them more. And that's the challenge, is you're like always kind of fighting that battle of the tug of war. So with a kid like that, say they're stepping away, I'm noticing them looking down a little more. I'm noticing them get uncomfortable. I'm going to think, okay, they might need visual input right now. I'm going to mirror them. They're probably in fight or flight. I'm going to try to get them into a calmer place by not only mirroring them, but also modeling. So I'm going to mirror their behavior, but I'm going to model neutrality in a calm disposition. I call it a calm face. So I'm not going to go up to them like, hey, what's going on? Because as soon as they see my brow and my jaw tighten, that's very threatening. So if I'm going to go over to them and I'm noticing they're in this place, I'm going to get on their level. I'm going to go down as to appear non-threatening. With certain kids, you can establish a physical connection, like you hold their hand and you look at them. That could be dysregulating for some kids, right? So you don't have these blanket rules. You have to figure out what the kid works with. And then I'm also going to consider what prompt I want to give them if I think they're dysregulated. And again, if it's an introverted kid, that's probably going to be a gestural prompt. I might go over to them, just look at them and kind of maybe act confused, because confused is kind of neutral. So I'm kind of going, And then I am going to possibly like look over to a space and kind of maybe nod. We could go over there and we might walk over there, and then they may sit down, and then I'll kind of mimic the way they sit, and I'll just chill with them for a second, and I'll kind of let them get to a place. And then once they get to a place where they're a little more regulated and they can talk a little more, I'll increase some input that I'm giving them or some prompt I'm giving them. So now I'm going to give them a little more verbal. So I'm going to talk a little more. But when I'm talking, I'm using a very quiet voice, and then tell them what I saw, and not in an interpretive way, but in a very physical way, in a neutral, observant way. So I may go, hey, I noticed you looked down back there. I think that maybe when you look down, you may need a break. And then I'll probably, just to cement the impact of it, I'll probably model what I saw them do. So like, I saw you kind of go like this. So I think when you do that, you may like need a break for us to just sit together. And I like sitting with you. So I'm okay with doing that. I would like to do that with you. So now I'm normalizing what they need. I'm not acting like they're crazy for needing it. I'm going, I get that. And then I'm also going, I like to be there for you in that time. You're not forcing me to do that. I enjoy that. And that's going to make them feel relieved just in general. So that goes into, we just focused on, right, the physical aspect. Like we talked about the physical dysregulation. And that's when we move over to the emotional dysregulation and regulation and how they pair together. Because when I'm giving them the physical regulation, they're more likely to get emotional regulation as a byproduct. When I'm giving them emotional regulation, they're more likely to accept physical regulation as a byproduct. So they work together, much like our physical, our soul, our mind-body connection, whatever you want to go into. That's incredibly important to connect them together. So when I'm normalizing the behavior of pulling them aside, and I like to do this with you, I'm connecting to them and I'm giving them validation that that's cool. And then I'm going to give them input about probably how they felt there. I noticed in there, you probably felt stuck. So although these are not true feelings in the context of therapy, it's a language kids can speak. So that's what I'm more concerned about, is making something, it'd be like I'm talking to you in English and you speak Spanish. I'm probably not going to use the most intense English vocabulary. That would probably not work. That would be for me, not for them. My goal is to communicate, not to look smart. So I'm going to say something like, well, it seems like back there you felt stuck. You felt worried. You felt overwhelmed. And I'm only making that interpretation after I notice they're calm. Because when you're trying to make interpretations when someone's dysregulated, it's not going to go over well. So, for example, if I'm extremely hungry and someone goes, hey, you're hangry right now, that's probably not going to work. I'm probably not going to go, oh, you're right. I am hangry. I'm going to calm down. I'm not hangry anymore. That's not going to work. Let me get my food. And then you can tell me, hey, I think you might have been a little hangry back there. And then I'll probably go, yeah, I was. Because now I'm me again. I'm out of that fight or flight state. I'm out of that dysregulation state.
So I got something really smart of you. First of all, dysregulated introverted child is typically not talking, running away, or avoiding social contact when he's at the moment. And then as a parent, the thing that I am able to do is to follow him, because he certainly needs some kind of support, and I can approach him and then just ask him, can I be with you?
Yeah.
Just not get into talking, not getting into investigation. What did you do? What happened? Why are you here? I'm just, can I be with you? And that's it. Just be with him. And then to find this sweet spot of what kind of support he needs. Does he need this strong hug or just the tickling? Or so that's something that when he's not upset, I can ask and tell him, like, we use the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're at the red zone, what can help you? Sometimes as a parent, you want to solve the thing right here, right now, but the kids is not ready to do it.
They're not there. So when you say the red zone, right, that's an important meaning that you both established, that you both communicated. That's going to make them feel more relieved in that space that they know they can get out. It's just like anything. What are you doing when you're going into a jungle, right? You're marking the trees to know how to get back because you don't want to be stuck in the jungle. If I have to get back, I can. I may not use it, but I feel relieved now and having more fun exploring or more sane in this space because I know I can get out. So that's a huge indicator. Is you can even have it be nonverbal. If the kid is really overwhelmed and they have trouble talking in that space, you can make it nonverbal. It could be a thumbs up. It could be here. It could be any gesture that would help them get out because that's the prompt, right? It's a gestural prompt. You don't even have to get into verbal. We're so used to communicating verbally as adults that we think that's the only way to communicate. When in reality, most of your communication is not verbal. Most of the meaning people gather from you is not what you say. It could be how you walk, it could be how you act, it could be your face. And then also, even if it is verbal, most of that is actually not what you're saying. It's how you're saying it. I mean, have you ever looked at a dog? And not that children are dogs, but they're both very cute and innocent and sweet and lack some insight. So you ever looked at a dog and you could go like, I love you. They're going to love that. You could say like, I hate you. They're going to love that. You could go, I love you. They're not going to love that because it's about how you say it. So, and it's the same for anything. So with kids, it's the same token. When you're giving them this calm, neutral response, this calm face, you're telling them, hey, I can handle your feelings, right? This is no problem for me. This is normal. And also, you can handle your feelings right now. You can make this face. This is possible. But I'm not forcing it on you. I'm just simply being with you. And then eventually you learn how to be with you. You learn how to be with you. That would be the goal.
So you gave some strategies for regulation, but can you get into more details in regard to how can we help a kid develop his self-regulation in terms of age range?
Yeah. So basically in this age range, right, 4 to 10, that's going to be extremely limited just because our nature of kids is that they just lack a lot of insight or self-awareness at that point. which is understandable. So basically what you're trying to do is plant a seed repeatedly. Basically, the way I work with these kids is behavioral. And oftentimes there's some sort of like dirty word around behaviorism, as if, you're kind of dehumanizing somebody. But I'm simply looking at it in a place of expectation. I'm not going to have high expectations or adult expectations for children. I'm going to understand things are cause and effect based, and that I'm planting seeds over time in a behavioral way until it becomes second nature. It's just like when you're dealing with someone with panic disorder. The panic disorder has become behavioral at a certain point. So your body goes, when this happens, I do this. And we get these neural pathways that we use over and over again. I heard an analogy that was amazing. It's like skiing the same way down a hill over and over again in deep snow. It's eventually going to be very hard to get out of that place, to actually move. That's our neural pathways. So I'm giving them an option of a different pathway, and I'm trying to reinforce it over the course of time enough to where it's actually even hard to leave that pathway in a healthy way. So when I'm giving them strategies and I'm giving them insight, it's going to go right over their head for at least the first 20 times because they're not in a place to learn it. But now they're getting used to that happening. They're getting used to that association. When I step away, they come up to me, we do this together, and that becomes comfortable. And then they're going to predict kind of what I'm going to say after that. And they're almost going to say it for me as if it's a mantra in their head. So we're responsible in a lot of ways for giving the kids insight over the course of time by simply being consistent for them, by giving them a predictability in life, because that's all anybody wants is consistency and predictability. So when we're giving them that, we're telling them, when you do this, this is what happens. Here's the cause and effect you like. See, it's circling back, the cause and effect. Here's the cause. Here's the effect. Cool. You have that cemented. And then when we get to a point of abstract thought, and also morality, even when we're getting more into, just to give some context of what I'm thinking, this would be Piaget's theory. So when a kid gets to maybe I think it's around 11, that's when you start to get to formal operation, or 12. So you get to their ability to have abstract reasoning and all of these other things. When you get to the psychosocial development of Erikson, that's where you're starting to get to identity versus role confusion. So now they're starting to kind of learn about their own identity and that they exist in the context of other people. And they're also starting to think about it abstractly in that sense. And then you get to Kohlberg's stages of morality, which means their morality is starting to be dependent upon what they want done to them, their existence amongst a society, their own values. They're starting to have values and identity. So we're going to encourage that exploration within them, and we're trying to cater to their self-concept. A fun thing about people is that it can be fun and not so fun, is when we have our self-concept locked, that is locked in. That is what we want to view ourselves as. So the kids are no different. I have one kid I work with, for example, who's 13. And when he feels angry, his response is to kind of raise his voice. And it's because he feels abandoned, right? That's the abandoning. Feeling abandoned happens before feeling angry. So what I do with him, I actually want to cater to his self-concept that he's very capable. The last thing I'm going to do is say you're incapable. He wants to be taken seriously, right? He wants to be seen as an adult. Obviously, he's not an adult, but what does he think an adult is? Capable, smart, responsible. So I'm going to say he's that thing. And I'm going to act confused if he does something that doesn't align with that. So I'm going to be like, I'm kind of confused. I know you're really responsible, and I know you have things really figured out. And also, I noticed that in this space, it's difficult for you to do this thing. How can I support you on this? It must be some problem with how things are being done outside of you. So what can we change? How can I support you? And so that helps with the externalization when a kid can reason, when they're getting to the point of insight. So when kids are in an appropriate age, we want to reason with them, and we actually want to include them on our own dilemmas. And we can do breathing exercises too. I actually use breathing exercises for young kids. But kids don't really like doing the 4-5-7 technique, in which we're really focusing on the exhale to activate the parasympathetic nervous system to calm them down, to make them feel relaxed. They're not too keen on organized breathing. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll actually have us sing together, or and this is how I'm tying in audio input, is I'm making it fun for them in an input regulation fashion. So we could sing together. If you notice, there's a lot of air moving out, which is great. That's going to relax them. Or we can actually make sounds back and forth together in a funny way. But I make sure they're elongated sounds. So the rule is it has to be 7 seconds. Or it can be like, who can make the longest sound? So I'm making these games incorporated with breathing. So I'm tricking them into breathing, but I'm also responding goofily. So for example, if you're noticing a kid is dysregulated and they're breathing heavily or whatever, you may go over to them and you'll actually maybe model the game without even saying anything, any words to them. So you could kind of go over to them and go, and I'm acting really neutral. I'm acting relaxed. Or I could go over to them and go, boom, boom. Or I could make sounds like, and it seems insane, right? And parents constantly, a lot of what we're working on is getting them goofy. Because what does Goofy say? Goofy says, I'm relaxed and I can handle this situation. It's cool. Some kids, it's patronizing. So I tell parents to definitely monitor that. Like I said, it's catered to the individual kid. But when I'm doing so, I'm trying to model for them to do that. Or I can go like, hey, you know what? I notice you're upset. Can we play a game together? Okay, I want you to make the sound I make. And then I'll make the sound you make. So now it's reciprocal. So I'm making them do the, maybe it's like a person falling and it's funny. And then their sound may be something that's actually not exhaling, but I'm allowing it because they're doing my sound and we're going back and forth. And now we're reciprocating play. We're connecting and we're also helping them regulate. So it's a lot of it's like trying to make something interesting versus when a kid's like 12 or older, they'll kind of understand the principle of what you're saying. So they'll kind of understand like, hey, you know, like these breaths can really calm you down. Can we breathe together? I really want to connect to you. We can treat them more like an adult in that fashion. Some kids, it's actually really fun to continue the game in that sense. A lot of regulation is also kind of understanding what you can do in the path of least resistance. So starting with the least resistance and then moving up from there. And that includes the prompt hierarchy, right? Starting with gestures, not saying anything, just being there. That could also include being non-threatening and being goofy. As the start, just no resistance to what's going on. That's catering to their self-concept. You're giving no resistance. You're rolling with it. In the context of a car being safe, a car is safe because it can accept impact. It's not because of how strong it is. It's when it's designed to actually crash. It's designed to fold in a safe way. So that's exactly what I'm doing. When kids are doing that, I'm actually not causing any resistance. I'm rolling with it. I'm folding with them because that stops the destruction. That makes it safe. And then eventually everyone's okay. Doing so in a neutral way as to establish a boundary as well. And I'm encouraging them after they get out of it. I'm giving them that self-concept care and that characterization of like, hey, you're a really calm kid. You handled that incredibly well. You're a very respectful kid, or you're a really smart kid, or whatever I need to say that gives them that affirmation. I kind of want to go back to recognizing the regulation in kids by recognizing the regulation in yourself, which is important. Your own insight as an adult is incredibly important. So little behavioral tools, like I said, because kids lack some insight. So the behavioral tools you can use is priming, shaping, giving them replacement behaviors, which includes first and then behaviors, because that's helpful for you. Think about this, priming for you, knowing I'm going to see my in-laws. If I didn't want to see my in-laws is a lot more helpful than, hey, my parents are here, sweetie. We're having dinner. I would be like, whoa, that's jarring. I feel shocked by that. I didn't have a chance to prepare for that. And when it comes to shaping behaviors are using that path of least resistance. Is, for example, if a kid's yelling when they're angry, they've learned to yell when they're angry. They've made that association already. You're not just going to get them to sit down at a table when they're angry and be like, I'm angry right now. I felt angry about this. No. You're taking what they're doing and you're sculpting it like a sculptor. It's not going to look immediately like a human being at first. It's going to be a big block, and then it's going to be a block where the arms are, and then it's going to go detail to detail. That's the concept of shaping. And that's what I would talk about when we're having reasonable expectations of them based on what they can do. So, for example, with one of the kids, I do parent training a lot. It's one of the things I really enjoy. So one of the kids, when he gets angry, he's in that neural pathway loop of, and I yell I hate you, or things like that. So our goal is actually next time is to not stop him from yelling, but maybe getting him to yell, I'm angry, because that's moving towards what we would generally like. And then eventually we can say, hey, can you just look at me and tell me, instead of I'm angry, we could just do I'm angry. Then we might go to I'm angry. And then we could go to something different than that. We're having reasonable expectations. But every single time he's doing that, we're actually reinforcing him and encouraging him for doing that. Hey, when you yelled, "I'm angry," I really appreciate that. I appreciate you telling me how you feel. And that matters to me. And I appreciate that. Something along those lines. And then we're also constantly, a behavioral technique to help regulation is having a replacement behavior. If you're trying to do this, I may not be able to let you do that, but I can give you this. So I'm considering you, even if I can't quite do it, having a boundary. If I'm canceling the date, that's my boundary. I'm busy, but I'm not just going to be like, hey, too bad, cancel the date. I'm going to go, hey, can we reschedule? Because I'm going to consider you when I'm doing that. So that's a first then behavior. Hey, well, first I have to do this, but then we can do that. That's an example of like a replacement behavior is, hey, I know you want to hang out with your friends. Let's do homework first, then you can do that first then. Or a replacement behavior would be like, oh, your music's too loud. Instead of me being like, turn it off, I might go, hey, I'm noticing the music's too loud. This is a real scenario, by the way. Hey, I'm noticing the music is pretty loud while I'm working, and I understand you want to listen to your music. So we could turn it down 50%, or I can also give you headphones. So make that choice, which is going to help regulate. Okay, I'm included. I'm being considered, but I'm not saying you get to just play the music as loud as you want. But I'm also giving a replacement behavior, which says I'm also considering you. And that's going to help with regulation. That's going to help with conflict de-escalation. And then I'm also going to validate how they feel if they're responding to me in a way, I call it the quiet voice. You're giving me a quiet voice, I will gladly explain what's going on. I will gladly treat you like an adult. I will gladly cater to your emotions. I'll gladly say like, hey, I get you felt disappointed that. I get you want to listen to music. I get that. I validate this. So that all that combined, and that goes back to this physical regulation and emotional regulation. That goes back to helping someone feel emotionally regulated. Is you're priming, you're giving them insight ahead of time of what's going to happen, what you think will happen. You're shaping their behavior. You're reinforcing whenever they're doing any sliver of a behavior you'd like, any little bit of it, even an attempt, so they don't feel discouraged in it. They feel encouraged by you. They feel like you view them as a great person. And that creates this self-fulfilling prophecy for them. When you have this positive attribution bias, which is what we generally give towards ourselves, is like, hey, I didn't do well at work. It's probably because of this. It wasn't me. We can do that with other people. And when we do that, we're giving them encouragement, this positive attribution. And it's really successful in couples, the Gottman method. It's really successful. But we're giving them encouragement. We're giving them self-fulfilling prophecy where next time they are about to yell, they go, oh, my parents said I was a really calm kid. I was a really respectful kid. I was a really responsible kid. Maybe I wouldn't yell. Maybe that's not what I would do if I was that. We don't need to tell them that. They intuitively realize that, and they'll make that choice because we responded in a neutral way to elicit self-awareness as to not label nothing. I trust your awareness over time. I trust it. I'm letting it go. I'm giving you a neutral response. You're smart enough to get it when you get it. And I understand that it may not be the expectation when you're 7, when you're 13, and something clicks in your brain and you're abstract, it's going to be there. So I guess we could end there.
Yeah, I like the most the part where you said, as a parent, expect from your kid, as you validate his feeling, to move from yelling to next time knowing how to regulate himself, see the evolution with his response and his regulation strategies. So I really love it. It's brilliant. So let's say we started using the strategies you just mentioned. What would be the red flags that kids might need an external help, that maybe I don't get my child and I might need myself or my child need an extra support?
Yeah. So when to get professional help? I would get professional help is immediately when you're noticing that you are triggered by your child. So meaning that when your kid's in fight or flight, you're going to fight or flight most of the time. So rule of thumb for behaviorism in general is about 70% of the time cements a behavior. So if you're only responding in fight or flight 30% of the time with your kid, that's cool. That does the job. You're consistently showing them that you actually don't usually do that. If it's getting above that, like half the time you're responding with triggers and it's difficult for you to manage, yeah, I would seek professional help. I'm validating them and I'm also giving them tools. And what happens when you have tools? You feel relieved. It's like marking the tree. You feel relieved that you can go to a place, you can retrace, you're in control. And you're going to feel more relieved around your kid. What's that going to do for them? It's going to make them feel more relieved. When they feel more relieved, you feel more relieved. And all of a sudden, we're in this peace cycle where we contribute to each other's peace instead of the pain cycle where we contribute to each other's pain. So I would say if you're noticing yourself consistently get triggered by your child and you're having trouble managing your own regulation, then, it's probably time to see someone. And I'll gladly encourage you in that process and validate you. You'll feel some relief from that, and then you'll feel a little more comfortable and equipped with tools. And then I'll continue encouraging and shaping you when you're doing your best. And then over the course of time, I'm modeling to you what you can do to your kid too.
That's great. And I really resonate with the part of we need to understand ourselves as parent, and to have more tools, it gives us more confidence. And when you have a plan, you don't feel hopeless. You have like, okay, I have a plan, and that's a process, and I know what my vision is. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's incredibly helpful.
That's awesome. Anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, if anyone wanted to see me or, use my services, my website is austinhudsonTherapy.com, AUSTINHUDSON. therapy.com. My info's on there. I love working with kids and parents and doing parent training. I do exactly what I talked about now. If I didn't, that would be strange. And I wish everyone the best in parenting.
Well, thank you very much for all of your strategies and wisdom and the insights. It was so good.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey there, thanks for being with us. Austin shared so much information and tools, and that's not all he has to give. So if you want more, you can find on the show note his link to the website. If you liked this episode, please rate the Playground Talks podcast and share it with your friends so more parents can benefit from it. And lastly, don't forget to treat yourself and your kids with compassion and curiosity. Bye!